Welcome to the Girls Marketing Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing and the perfect backing track to your workday. Every week, we get up close and personal with marketers revolutionising the industry so you can learn from the best in the game. From the latest marketing trends to building a successful marketing career, no topic is off limits. At Girls in Marketing, we champion progress, inspire change, and encourage women to take the marketing world by storm. Check out our website and membership to learn more and get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle. Right, let's dive into another episode together. Welcome back to the Girls in Marketing Podcast, the perfect backing track to your workday. Today, we have a super exciting guest from a disruptor bank, and we are sure that you have seen them on social media before. Before we dive into the episode, please can you do me a favour and click that subscribe or follow button for the podcast. It helps us out more than you can imagine and means that we can continue to get great guests that you want to hear from on the podcast. Today's guest is highly requested. He's a mastermind behind some of the most engaging social media campaigns in the finance industry. Today, I'm sitting down with Richard Cook, Senior Social Media Manager at Monzo, to discuss working in social media, how social media can work in institutional industries like banking. This is such a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear Richard's insights and secrets to social media success. Listen in until the end to find out about the famous British Airways billboard. Enjoy the episode. So lovely to have you on today, Richard. I want to start by talking a little bit about how you got into marketing. So before your role now at Monzo, how did you actually get into marketing as a discipline?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Marketing, it's not something I've really thought I would get into. When I was thinking about career options at university, it was not anywhere on my list. I thought I was going to do something like run a bookshop or something boring like that. Because, for me, marketing was always like advertising, sales, things that I didn't really have much interest in. And when I was at uni, I was doing a degree in philosophy, which again didn't really particularly lend itself to. I didn't do a degree in marketing or anything like that. So again, I sort of felt like I don't know anything about marketing. Marketing isn't for people like me. Leave that to those people. So I kind of more stumbled into it than sort of found a career in it. But I think along the way I discovered what marketing really is. And marketing isn't just sales. It isn't just advertising. It's this sort of whole world of talking to customers and communicating things to people and finding clever and interesting and funny ways of doing that. And I think that's what's appealed to me is the challenge of how you talk to people and get across a point or sometimes sell them something. But a lot of the marketing I do it's still not sales oriented. It's more brand and things like that, trying to sort of tell people who you are, getting people to like you to some extent, making people laugh. Originally, I had no intention of getting into marketing. I didn't really understand it, didn't know what it was, but I'm glad I've ended up where I am, and marketing isn't as scary as I thought it'd be. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, my kind of route into marketing was not non-traditional. I did psychology at university, kind of found marketing whilst I was at university. So I feel like, to be honest, a lot of people are getting into marketing quite unconventionally now. You do have that typical route of going to university, getting a degree, graduating, finding kind of a grad job in marketing. But so many people just don't really do that. It is that untraditional notion. So you said to us that you found your degree pretty useless. So what advice would you give to people who, I don't know, maybe have a degree that they think, I don't really want to go into this field. I want to maybe go into marketing, but I've done, history or I've done something that isn't related.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be too harsh on my degree, but yeah, it was kind of useless. I can talk about how studying philosophy taught me so many critical thinking skills, but I'm hardly applying my knowledge of, Kant and Descartes to my day-to-day marketing practice. So yeah, I would say having background or experience in marketing probably helps to some extent, just because you'll be more familiar with, what is the marketing funnel? What is, a target demographic audience? All these the vocabulary of marketing is good to know, but it is it's definitely not a prerequisite for having a career in the industry by any means. In some ways, I think coming into marketing with too many preconceptions about what marketing is can hold you back to some extent. If you try to apply something that you've learned about in a textbook to the real world, you're going to struggle. We all know that actual consumers don't behave like the rational agents that marketing teaches you that they are. So I think finding another way in that's more, I guess, human-led or just you stumble upon can also be a better way in. Like the way I came in was not through like learning about marketing. It was just my experience of customer service and speaking to people, and like just applying that to like a non-customer service setting, like gave me an edge because I didn't have any baggage of like what marketing should be. So I was kind of like freer to pursue my own ideas of how to achieve marketing objectives. So to people who are worried, like, I don't have a marketing degree, I can't possibly be in marketing, it's like, yes, you can. Like, anyone can sort of be a self-starter in marketing. I think it's a very democratic industry in that sense. Anyone can, hop on Canva and start posting on Instagram. Anyone can create content like on LinkedIn, like every channel. You can just make a TikTok and start posting your marketing. Even if you're only marketing yourself, everyone can be a marketer. That's what I say.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so interesting that you say about consumers and how the reality is, they don't always work perfectly through that kind of sales funnel and all stuff like that, because that's the truth.
Yeah.
And then what happens is people who do study marketing or who do that kind of traditional like element of marketing then find it so difficult when they, graduate or leave education to kind of apply that knowledge, that theoretical knowledge to the real world, because as you say, people don't act like we think they act. We have this whole like customer personas and like buyer journeys and, the awareness phase and consideration. And okay, these are, very relevant and things that we should take from. But I think sometimes people kind of take them as like their Bible. They are like, this is how it works, but it doesn't always work like that. Yeah,
I think sometimes you can definitely see this when campaigns don't go quite as planned. It's like, well, we did all the research and we had a very strong understanding of who our customer was and what they wanted, and we got everything right by the book. But then like when it meets the customer's like, I don't care. And I think like you can be very guilty of applying almost too much marketing knowledge and not enough, I guess, instinct or even just experience with customers. Yeah. And like I think that's what where I started my career, was like just speaking to customers a lot and like learning how they think and like what works, and also just like being a customer yourself. Like I guess we kind of forget as marketers sometimes that we are also an audience. Like we're an audience to every brand or company we don't work for, right? But sometimes we talk about customers, consumers, the target audience as someone who isn't us. And I don't know where these people live. Like who are these people that exist in marketers' brains, but like you can't meet them on the street. It's like, well, you actually talk to people, just like go around the office, go into the street, show people stuff. They'll react very differently to like what you've defined as your audience, I think.
Do you have that burning desire to create a website for a new idea but don't have any coding experience? Don't worry, I've got you. Hostinger is a sponsor of today's episode, and they have created an AI website builder tool allowing anyone who wants to take their idea online to do so with zero coding skills. Just write 3 sentences to sum up what you're looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. The AI even offers personalized suggestions on layout, design, and content. Bring your new idea to life by heading to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing and use the exclusive code girlsinmarketing for 10% off your plan. What's stopping you? I watched a talk a while ago that talked about how marketers, similar to what you just said, marketers are like a key demographic for people, even if your target audience aren't marketers, because marketers like will shout about your brand. For example, obviously all the stuff with Monzo. A lot of marketers talk about how amazing Monzo is and like all the social stuff and like everything like that. They're kind of like, you can make marketers your brand advocates without even realizing it, which is so interesting.
Yeah, I guess the pitfall there is you never want to be creating marketing content just for marketing people, right? And we talk about like ads for ads people and ads that win awards and that kind of thing. I guess like there's a fine line, and I guess it's about striking the balance between content that like appeals to a mass audience, engages like people who aren't marketers, but also like has sort of the marketing chops to it that is worth celebrating. Because go too far one way and you'll create content that is like critically well received, but I guess panned by its audience, kind of like a movie, right? Like the critics loved it, but the audience hates it. You never want to be like making stuff just for them, but at the same time, you don't want to be making stuff that is so broad and unappealing that it's like for nobody. So you always have to like, I agree that who you are targeting your content at is super important.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I think I'd love to talk to you about kind of like how you got to where you are now. So obviously we said you took that untraditional route into marketing. what was kind of that starting point then? Because you've actually also worked at Spotify, right?
Yes. So yeah, fresh out of uni, I didn't know what I wanted to do, had no career plan whatsoever. It just so happened that I was like looking on our career site and I saw that Spotify were hiring in the city. I was like, great, I use Spotify every day. That's a brand I like. That's a product I like. They'll do. And the job was in customer service. It was very basic, just sort of answering people's emails, like logged out of my account, can't find my playlist, basic customer stuff. But, I'd my previous jobs had been waiter in a hotel, stacking shelves in a co-op. It's like I had never had like a proper job before. So even that was like big for me. And I spent 2 years like answering like emails in customer service and learned a lot just by doing that. Like I must have sent thousands and thousands of emails, talked to thousands and thousands of customers, which was like super interesting because you'd hear from them how they really felt about the brand. You weren't speaking to like the ideal customer. You were speaking to customers who were angry at you or upset or confused. And it was your job to try and help them sort of resolve the misunderstanding or thing that had upset them. So like I was constantly being exposed to like what our audience really thinks about us. And after a few years of that, I moved into, still within customer service, but I moved into like the new world of social media customer service, which was like just becoming a thing. I helped spin up the first, Spotify's first support Twitter account, Spotify Cares. What we found was there was an opportunity that didn't really exist with email on social, which was like engagement. So we could fix someone's problem and then also go like above and beyond. We could surprise them, we could delight them, we could do something engaging that they would then reshare. Because when you're speaking on social, it's not this one-to-one relationship. Email is kind of a closed garden in that sense, right? There's no like opportunity to like blow up on email. But on social, if we did a really good reply to someone, like fix their problem, but also like wowed them in some way, they would reshare that. And that was like amazing because our support tweets could make the headlines. That literally happened. Like we would send a customer like a funny playlist after fixing their issue. They would share it. The Guardian would write about it. I was like, oh, did we just do marketing by mistake? And like that's kind of like how I learned that like, no, that's what marketing can be. We're not like creating adverts, but we're just like engaging customers. They're resharing it. We're creating buzz. We're creating awareness. Creating like brand love. We're kind of accidentally doing all this work just by like trying to be fun. And that was mostly driven by ourselves and the team. No one was telling us you need to be, creating marketing content as the social team, as the social support team even. It just so happened that was kind of fun for us to do, and it just felt like the right thing to do. Like we work for this fun brand. We should be having fun with customers. So we were still the social support team, but we were like cracking this whole new way of doing, I guess, social marketing. Whereas like, we had a proper social marketing team as well, but we were like kind of in parallel creating social content. Like what I later learned is basically social content alongside them. And so like eventually I was asked, do you want to like move into marketing, like basically full time and work like alongside those social marketing teams? Because by that point, I had 2-3 years of experience of creating social content. And so it was a super easy transition into the world of marketing. And it wasn't so different because like, oh, it's just like making cool stuff for social media. That's fine. I can do that. That's easy. But yeah, I was suddenly confronted with, marketing funnels and brand strategies and things that I'd never heard of before. So, I'd be in meetings and they'd all be talking and the agency would be talking about, oh, we need to raise awareness of the upper funnel activity. And I was like, what's the content? Like, is the content any good? So yeah, I was kind of like naive to some extent. I mean, I think I know a bit more now, like, but I'm still kind of naive about some things. But I've always been like, driven by speaking to customers and like how they actually think and what they say. And ultimately just trying to have fun. And I think like coming from a place of wanting to have fun, you will create content that is like fun and engaging as well.
Yeah. I love the idea that, you kind of moved in to marketing kind of like quite naturally. Yep. Because as you say, you started to be in that like social support team and kind of like naturally create content. And I think that's, to be honest, quite a way that a lot of our community get involved in marketing, is that naturally kind of happens. Maybe they're in an admin position or a reception position or a similar, customer service position. And then it kind of gets to the point where, they've shown that interest in marketing. But obviously then when you moved to the marketing kind of position. Did you find that then over time they kind of started to integrate like teams and stuff? Because I feel like that's something that obviously I'm super passionate about, is like the integration of teams, not necessarily integration, but like working together as teams. Because as you said, when you first started in like the social support team, it was kind of like a new thing. So how do you feel like when you moved into marketing that kind of changed maybe?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, how do you structure these kind of teams? I guess it depends on like what stage your company is at. Obviously Spotify is a huge company now and is in many markets and like social media teams in lots of different places. So like it wouldn't be as easy for them to like work natively with their folks in customer support like it might have been when I was there. But at Monzo, I've always tried to stay very, very close to our like customer service folks, partly because like that's where I came from, so I have an affinity for them. But also like I see our customer service as basically like the forefront of our marketing. A lot of people don't think about like customer service as a marketing function, but like I kind of do. Like if you're speaking to customers, that is marketing, and like no one speaks to our customers more than the folks in customer support. So yeah, I'm literally talking to our customer support folks, particularly the ones who work on social, because like their work is also external facing. They are doing comms, they are doing essentially social marketing all day long. So like, I would encourage people to like not neglect those teams. Like these are the people that are representing your brand on a day-to-day basis. And if I had to pick between hiring someone who was fresh out of uni with a marketing degree in social marketing versus someone who's been working on a like social support role for 2 years, I'd pick them every time, because they actually have the experience of speaking to customers, knowing how they feel, knowing how to the challenges of condensing a complicated message into a tweet, for instance. That's like something you can only really get through experience. So in terms of structuring those teams as close as possible is my answer. It'd be wrong to kind of silo especially support folks away from marketing, because no one knows your customers better than the people who speak to them all day long.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to integrate, or to kind of at least talk and have that like openness with, customer support people, because they're the people that, as you said, they're external facing, but they also have to keep in like a tone, like a brand tone. You can't be working customer service and almost kind of have your complete own tone, especially if you work for a brand that has some sort of reputation or some sort of like, even reputation to like uphold. You can't just have one random, customer service person who goes completely off the rails and starts saying all of these different things on social, especially because, as you say, it's public facing. And I think that it's so important to have that conversation and understand that those people are like an integral part, especially to like brand and like how you're perceived. Because if you have someone in your customer service support team that maybe is like super blunt or doesn't really follow the brand guidelines or something like that, that could stand out like a sore thumb.
Yes, that
could be a good thing for your brand, or it could be a bad thing for your brand. And I think it's so important to realize that.
Yeah, I guess like if you looked at all the content that exists out there from Monzo, like what I do in social marketing is like a very small slither of it, because they're sending many responses every hour to the questions we get online. So they are creating a content of sorts that outweighs what I'm putting out. So yeah, we stay very close to them, both in terms of like providing them with resources so that they know what to say. Like, hey, this is our tone of voice. This is our brand. This is who we want to be. This is how we want to sound. For instance, like writing guidelines is a super helpful resource to give, especially for someone like us where, if we say we use emojis sometimes in our writing, what you don't want is for that to be translated in the head of, the person on the front line being like, I've got to use 10 emojis in every tweet. It's like, no. So there's like some training as well we provide, like sitting down with them and being like, cool, yes, we use emojis like throughout the app, throughout like our writing, but, what does that mean when you're writing like breaking some bad news to someone in a tweet? Maybe don't use an emoji there. So there's a little bit of like, not course correcting, but just like nudging in the right along the right lines.
And I think even if you work for maybe a smaller business, you can still, as a marketer, you can still provide those resources to people in your company. And I think that's so important, that obviously with Monzo and with Spotify and, kind of bigger brands, as you say, you kind of have these like specific guidelines and stuff. Sometimes people work at companies that they don't, but you as a marketer, if you want to, you can create brand guidelines, tone of voice, and you can share that with people in your company. And you can say to them, if, for example, you do have a customer support team, you can say, this is how, we'd reply to these sort of messages and this is how we do this. And I think that it's just so good to have that element of collaboration. And I think having people on your side as a marketer, especially if you are a kind of smaller team, whether you're a one person marketing team or even if you're like, a smaller team, I think it's so important to have people to understand this is how we want to be perceived online.
Yeah, I think we're quite lucky in that I've always been able to really, really trust the folks in our customer support. It's not like I have to sit down with them and like handhold them through every tweet. It's more being on the same wavelength and being like, this is who we want to be, help us bring it to life. Like we hire smart people, we trust them. I don't have to like sign off on their, like that wouldn't work. I couldn't sign off every single tweet that they send, but working with them and being like, okay, this is who we want to be. How do you think we could do this? So we kind of both arrived at that point together. So I told them, let's try and delight customers as much as possible. Let's look for opportunities for engagement. If someone says, hi Monzo, it's my birthday and I'm trying to do this. Or hey Monzo, I'm getting married next week and I'm trying to do this. That's like, hold that in the back of your mind. Solve the problem first. That's the most important thing. Always solve the problem. But then like follow up. Be like, cool, maybe we can send this person some flowers. Or maybe we can, I don't know, send them a Monzo gift in the post of some sort. We've done that before. It doesn't have to be anything crazy big, and like budgets aren't, obviously limited for customer service teams. But just to get into the mindset, I was like, let us know if you see anything and like we can think about it together, because you never know who's going to get in touch and what the situation might be. And there might be something that, hey, this is actually really cool for marketing. And there's definitely been things we've used in marketing that originated from something that our customer service spotted. They spotted, hey, a lot of people are doing this thing with their savings pots, or a lot of people are doing this weird savings challenge. Do we want to talk about that? I was like, well, if you've spotted it, if that's a trend that you think exists, yes, we should be talking about it. So there's an element of almost like, we talk about social listening. And like, obviously we have our tools and stuff, but nothing can really beat a person who just like is exposed to a vast amount of customer noise. And I've definitely been guilty of trying to read every tweet about Monzo. And it's like, well, I probably shouldn't be doing that for, my eye strain. But like if we have a team of people who are reading basically everything that comes in, who better to talk to for like inspiration for our upcoming campaigns. So yeah, we have like channels and processes set up such that they can flag stuff that might be of interest to us, whether that's a funny tweet we might want to like retweet, or maybe post somewhere else and like really hero. Maybe like they see something and that becomes the central insight for the next campaign. So like, I guess training them kind of in the marketing mindset to some extent, because they are also like the marketers of tomorrow to some extent.
No, I love that. I'd love to talk about your role then. So obviously you are senior social media manager at Monzo. I'd love to understand kind of what is that role and how does it, if it does, differ from just like a traditional kind of social media manager role?
Yeah, well, social media manager is such a strange job title. I think for some job descriptions I've seen, social media manager can mean basically a jack of all trades, working on the website, PR, doing all kinds of weird SEO stuff. But for me, historically, it's sort of been across two categories. First one is strategy. So what is our social media strategy? How is social supporting the business? Content strategy, content pillars, what's the content we're creating? Channel strategy, what channels are we on? So that's one half strategy. And then execution, content creation. And I think we're seeing social media manager role evolve into like a social content creation role. And that's like a very exciting area of the business. But like as I've sort of gone up in my career, I've tried to focus more on the strategy and less on the execution. And like definitely I've had a lot of fun over the years on the execution side of things, like writing millions of tweets, coming up with ideas for Instagram posts, all those hours in Canva and Photoshop. I've even tried to be, that creator person. I've filmed TikToks on the fourth floor of my flat to no success. I'm just not, I guess I'm a creative, but not a creator. So, as we've scaled up, I've sort of had to be like, I can't create all this content myself. I'm not good enough at it. And also at the level and volume we want to create, we need support. So like we kind of fleshed out that side of the team with, like designers and creators, which has freed me up to focus really on the strategy side, which like is really super exciting. It's kind of newer to me, rather than being like a scrappy one person social media team all the time. I can sort of sit back a bit and think and say, well, how do we want to represent like the brand on social? How actually is social supporting the business? So I'm sort of now in the world of social reporting and social listening and social strategy, which is something like was not part of my job earlier on when I was scrappier. But I guess that's how I would describe like the evolution of my career over time. More strategy, less execution, but ultimately I will always be a kind of like scrappy social media manager at heart. There's nothing I love more than like diving into like the LinkedIn comments and just like writing 50 silly replies. I'll never give that up, but like I think I do have to give some of that up as I go. You have to give away your Legos, as they say, give away some of the fun stuff to people who can like just take it on full time. So I can focus on the, I guess, the big picture stuff.
Yeah. And I suppose as well, as you do progress in your career, that's kind of what happens.
Yes.
Typically, obviously it doesn't have to. You can kind of stay in that more of a creator position if you want to. But I think as you go on in your career, it's just kind of inevitable, really, if you do want to progress, that it does get more kind of strategy led. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of where the success comes from, is the strategy. I've seen a lot of people talking about just purely creating content with like no strategy at all, just creating content for the sake of it. And I think there's always should be, or, there should be a strategy behind any kind of content that you're creating, even if the strategy is just like experimentation, trying new things. I'm not saying it has to be like these dedicated content pillars or anything like that, and I almost kind of think having the opportunity to be a creator, if you want to be a creator, is really important, because I think there's this whole kind of new, fresh generation of people coming up into the workplace now that are super creative and also creators. But I like the fact that you said like you are creative, but you wouldn't say you're a creator.
No,
I think that's quite like, I often think people think you've got to be both.
Yeah, I get really excited about creative ideas, and like I love a brainstorm. I love just like generating the long list of things we could be doing. It's like, oh, what if we like, I don't know, painted the sky hot coral? Like that's cool. I don't know how we'd ever do that. So like often my ambition doesn't match up to the reality or frankly what I can do. Like, yeah, as much as I celebrate not having a background in marketing, I also don't have a background in design. I don't know how to use Photoshop. I'm self-taught. I don't know how to use a video camera. Like, if you put a video camera in my hands, I wouldn't know what to do with it. So like, I'm frankly not good enough at those things to warrant me being like the forever person for that. So it is right to find people and like work with people who do have the skills to kind of help maybe bring the creative vision we have to life, and also just to have more ideas. There's only so far we can get with just my ideas alone, and like diversity promotes better ideas. And so like two people in a room will come up with ideas that are more than twice as good as one person on their own, because you have that back and forth with someone, especially if that person is someone who has a different lived experience to you. So like whenever I'm like collaborating, I'm always trying to like get voices in the room, just like what's some different ideas we can come up with? What's like something we haven't tried before? What's a non-obvious way of thinking about this? So yeah, it's I don't mind not being a creator. I like to work with creators, even if I'm not like a creator myself.
Yeah. So Monzo's FCA regulated, and I was super keen to talk to you about, because obviously we're talking about being creative and all stuff like that. And I think that we have a lot of people in our community who work for companies that are FCA regulated or in kind of regulated industries. How do you kind of be creative, obviously considering the fact that, you are kind of FCA regulated and you've got these things to adhere to?
Yeah, it was interesting coming from Spotify, the music company, because we could just tweet, listen to the new Taylor Swift album, best album ever. And you didn't have to like substantiate that claim or anything. It was just, you could just say it. So, again, I was slightly naive coming from the world of music to the world of banking, which is obviously very serious, highly regulated for good reason. And so there was a bit of a kind of like adjustment period of learning, okay, cool. So we can't just say whatever we like. There are rules around marketing communications and the promotion of certain products, which, once you get your head around them, they're not that scary. They're mostly like, most of the principles are around good communication. Like the FCA says that your communication should be clear, fair, and not misleading, which like if you think about it, is a pretty low bar. Like that's just like, don't write unclear, unfair, misleading things. It's like, well, you probably shouldn't be doing that anyway. But I had to sort of get my head around, okay, no, there are like processes and rules specifically around what's called like financial promotions. So when you talk about certain regulated products, like you can't just say, put all your money in this amazing new savings account. That would be, not a good thing to encourage. So yes, there is like a creative challenge when you're working in banking that doesn't exist in other industries. But yeah, I do see it as a challenge and not a blocker. I think the temptation is to be like, whoa, there's risk here. We should be risk averse and not even try to be engaging. Let's just like take a very safe route and just put out content that is uncontroversial. Whereas like what I saw was like, okay, cool. There's like a restriction here, a limit on what we can do. How do we work around that? And I think good creatives see restrictions not as blockers, but as challenges to overcome. And often you can do like more creative work when there is like a limited space rather than this like huge ocean of opportunity. So yeah, I guess one of the things that we cracked quite early on was setting up processes internally to make sure that we were remaining compliant. So, we have a whole sign-off process. We work with our governance teams just to be like, okay, cool. We want to talk about this thing. Here's what we're going to say. Here's what we're going to create, and like making sure that gets like approved. So there exist approval processes where we are creating content that would, trigger certain requirements, but then also understanding where those requirements don't apply. So like if you want to put out a post being like, isn't the weather lovely today? That doesn't really apply to the regulations. Like, it's fine. You can say the weather's nice today. That's not a problem. So like on social, you can get quite far just by not talking about stuff that would trigger the rules. You can just sort of focus on brand and driving brand love, which is kind of what social is good for anyway. Like we know that like social is great for creating entertaining content rather than sort of trying to drive home heavy-handed product messages. So it's kind of like a natural fit we found, which is, well, just don't try to do too much of these sort of hard-hitting sales stuff that would land you in trouble with like the legal team. Just focus on like nice, bright brand stuff because that's what people like better anyway. So like, yes, like there's been an adjustment period of learning what the rules are and how they work, learning the guidelines and creating those processes. But at the same time, like I think we've able to comfortably navigate to a place where like we can create our content with confidence and not have to worry like day to day is like, oh God, are we going to get in trouble with this? We know where the lines are, and like we work closely with our compliance teams to understand where the risks are and making sure that we have a risk appetite approved with them. But for the most part, like I'm not too concerned about it, honestly.
Yeah. And I think, that's a good thing, the fact that you as a creative take that as a challenge. Because I feel like, if maybe you're an entry level marketer and you've started in some sort of regulated industry, it could feel quite overwhelming, but the fact that you now feel in a place where, it's that confidence building, and the fact that, you do kind of create content that sometimes isn't related at all to regulation, yep. Sometimes is, but there's kind of had those steps have been put in place to kind of make sure that everything's, covered and everything like that. But I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of like Monzo and your different approach to different platforms. So obviously you said you are quite like strategy led, and it's something that, you are passionate about as being that kind of strategy led as well. So when we think about social media, everyone kind of thinks of, the typical kind of platforms and, LinkedIn and Instagram and all stuff like that. And so many people just kind of post the same content or like a little bit different content, but on the same channels, right? Yeah. And I think what we're seeing now is that actually that's not really working. You've got to tailor content to different platforms and stuff like that. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your kind of strategy with that, with Monzo, and what kind of platforms you're using at the moment and kind of the kind of approach of those as well.
Great question. Something I'm working on at the moment, so some light spoilers ahead. But we do have a social media strategy that applies, I guess, across all our channels, and then we tailor it per channel, as you say. Like it's best practice to tailor both your content and I guess strategy per channel. And our broad strategy across social is around, I guess, like relatable money moments, like just reflecting like how people actually use their money on a day-to-day basis back at them. So, we don't use our channels to broadcast. It's much more engagement-led than broadcast-led. We're not like putting out messages being like, get this account or buy this product or use this feature. Like that We do fold that in as and when, but for the most part, we just try to sort of, reflect how you're actually feeling and how people are actually using money on a day-to-day basis. So if something's trending, is there a money part to it that we can talk to? If a meme is going around, how do we make it relevant to Monzo? So it's very topical. It's very kind of like in the moment, and we do tailor it to channel. So obviously on TikTok, we'll be led by the trends of TikTok. Is there a trending sound we can use? Is there a trending template? But not only that, I guess that's a kind of a passive strategy. We also have an active strategy around, okay, cool, how do we create our own moments on the channel? How do we create our own sort of fame-driving viral TikToks and things like that? Is that through campaigns? Is it we bring a campaign to life on the channel? Or is it just we've got a one-off idea for a really sick TikTok, let's just spend a week making that? So it is per channel. If you look at our LinkedIn channel, for instance, that's a bit of a different expression of the strategy. Rather than relatable money moments, I describe it as relatable office moments. So still kind of rooted in relatability, but LinkedIn is meant to be this serious corporate business platform. So it didn't really make sense for us to talk about money moments as such. It was well, what if it was just office moments? So if you go on our LinkedIn channel, you'll see us talking about when someone moves your office chair, or when you go to the fridge and have a bad time, stuff like that, where it's basically not about money at all, but it's kind of doing the same thing as we are on our other channels. If you look at our Instagram, you're wow, Monzo really gets how I use my money. They're talking really specifically about how when I go abroad, I love to get a Fanta Limon. You know what I mean? That's what we're doing on Instagram. It's seeing you. And on Instagram, on LinkedIn, we're also seeing you. It's just we see you at work.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, I describe our sort of broad social strategy as just we see you, and that will differ depending on the context that we're seeing you in. Are we seeing you at work? Are we seeing you on Instagram, which is lifestyle, showing off a little bit? Is it we see you on TikTok, around the latest trend, that kind of thing? So there is a broad strategy, and it is tailored per channel, and it does filter back up to the broader brand proposition as well.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of what makes Monzo a disruptor bank, because I think traditionally banks, you wouldn't really see them posting that kind of relatability
memes
piece. Yeah. And I think, if you think about traditional banks, they, for so long, it's been such a kind of corporate industry, very, led by the people who, what are that traditional element. And I think that's worked, but I think now, especially Gen Z and the younger generation, I think people want that personality. They want the personable side. They want that relatable side. And I think that's kind of obviously what makes Monzo as a brand a disruptor brand. And I think that it's nice that your social strategy and the kind of marketing strategy in general is coming down to that as well. And it's kind of integrated throughout, because I think that that's ultimately, again, helps with the success of everything that you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes wonder, do people want their bank to be fun? And do people actually want this from their bank? And historically, banks aren't very fun. Banks are very safe. Banks are very serious. There's almost a value in being boring for some banks, where they're relying on legacy and just hundreds of years of being around, and they're not trying to appeal to your sense of. They're not trying to entertain you, because they're just a safe place for your money. Whereas, I guess part of it is being a disruptor brand, trying to stand out in that crowd. We're zigging when they're all zagging or not moving at all in some ways. But I think part of it is just knowing our customers really well, and knowing well, they don't come to social media to watch a webinar. They don't come to social media to read your 200-page corporate report. And so yes, it is about standing out and being disruptive, literally disruptive in your feed, because we look different and sound different, but also just being disruptive in our approach to content. I guess if you think about competitors, who are our competitors? I don't see it as the other banks, honestly. I see it as the other people who are creating content that our audience like. It's not about the product, it's about the audience, right? So if you ask me who our competitors were, they would be more lifestyle brands. They would be, I don't know, name them, but fast food or airlines or cereal companies, those kind of people that have really cracked how to speak to their audience, because ultimately that's what Monzo is about, is knowing our audience really, really well, creating a product for them, creating a brand for them, and reflecting it back at them. So yeah, we are disruptive to some extent because we're being different, but like we're also just trying to keep up with like people that speak to their customers really, really well.
Yeah. So I would say one of my favorite campaigns of Monzo is the year in review. I'd love to know a little bit about your kind of experience on that campaign and kind of like the success of it, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
Year in Monzo is our end of year campaign where we kind of like wrap up your spending for the year. Obviously comparisons with like what Spotify do, people like that. I think end of year campaigns are pretty like not standard, but like they're common by this point. And I think it makes sense as a kind of natural extension of what we're doing all year long. So if our strategy throughout the year is to relate to you and your money, like reflect back your spending habits to you and sort of expose you to yourself to some extent, it makes sense at the end of the year when everyone's in this kind of like reflective, contemplative mood to like bring that to life to an even greater extent. At the end of the year is a special time. There's something in the air. People want to look back and celebrate their wins and losses throughout the year. And, because there is this precedent of doing it in a sort of wrap-up style campaign, it makes sense for us to do it. Because ultimately, what Year in Monzo is basically a glorified bank statement, if you think about it. It's just saying, you went to Greg's this many times, you went to Brett this many times. Like, you could just read that as like a spreadsheet. But what we do is we deliberately inject it with like personality and life, wrote so many jokes about sausage rolls, like don't even start. In order to make it fun and shareable and like emphasis on the shareable. Like the whole point of it is, yeah, it's fun for you at a personal level, but like it's something you should want to like share and put on your socials, partly because like it's funny, but partly because like we've seen you in some really sort of fun and exposing way. So yeah, I love that campaign. It's a really interesting one where I guess like social leads on it a little bit. Like it's kind of like a social first campaign, even though it is built like by product teams, engineers, people like that. It's a time where we get to sort of take the approach that we take on social media, which is, I guess, in a nutshell, relating back to our customers, but like letting all of our customers, all the millions of our customers in on the fun, and millions of people do see it and do share it. So it's always like a big success. And yeah, we have a lot of fun just like reading the responses. Like I definitely. I love that day, the launch day, where we're all in the room together, the whole team, and we're just like reading like all the reactions and like retweeting them. A big part of it is actually reusing reactions. So like on the day, quote tweeting people or taking like a fun tweet, a fun TikTok about it and like putting it on our own channels. So like we keep it going a little bit as well. There's a kind of like virtuous circle of we create content, audience reacts to it. We use the audience reactions as like the fresh second wave of content and just like keeps going and going, which is like something I don't think a lot of end of year wrap ups do. Often they'll just be like, here you go. And then it's kind of like, see ya. Whereas like for us, it's like, well, no, telling you the story is only half of the story. The second half is really, okay, and here's what how everyone feels about it. Like we're today, like we're exposing the nation and people are mad about it, but like everyone's kind of in on the joke. Obviously money is a very sensitive topic for some people, but we always try and keep it like lighthearted and like fun and like we're poking fun. We're not actually like making fun.
Yeah. And I just think it's such a talkable subject because when it happened, it's like, oh, I spent like $4,000 on Greg's.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like, how did that even happen? And I think that that's something that, you go away and you even tell like parents about or family about. And obviously it's that social impact, but I think it's also the impact that happens like offline as well. And I do think that happens with quite a lot of these like end of year campaigns or the ones especially that are personalized, and it's personalized marketing to a T, isn't it? And I think that that's what people love now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of see how it gets shared. I mean, with like my marketing hat on, we can talk about like, oh, it drives brand awareness and brand affinity and I guess to some extent FOMO, like fear of missing out for people who don't get their results. It's like, oh, my bank didn't do that for me. Maybe I should bank with Monzo. Like, that's not the point. The point is it's not like a big acquisition driving campaign. We don't optimize for that. It is like really to kind of reward and engage, deepen the engagement with the customers who are using Monzo already every day as their main bank. But yeah, in terms of like sharing, yes, like there is a lot of sharing that happens externally. Like we like trend on Twitter or what have you. Like there's a lot of great content that is created, but a lot of the sharing happens, I guess, we talk about dark virality. So like a lot of people are sharing on their WhatsApp groups or close friends Instagram stories, Discord channels, Slack, places that we can't actually see, which is annoying because I can't measure it. And I just have to sort of go, well, loads of people are sharing this, but we can't measure it. Just trust me, bro. No, we can measure to some extent. But it means like, yeah, we're creating this like fame driving moment of which only a tip is actually above the surface. And there's so much like going on, in, I guess, like back private channels that we don't have access to. But like, it is still creating a buzz, and it's kind of like, kind of fun that like, it's kind of not even all visible to us.
Yeah. So obviously Monzo, as well as doing like these fun campaigns, you guys also do serious campaigns really well. And I wanted to talk about the ADHD, like living with ADHD campaign that you guys did, and kind of how you kind of balance the fun with the serious, because I feel like that's sometimes an issue for marketers. Is like, okay, when can we be serious? When can we be fun?
Yeah, it's the worst when you sort of see a brand, you go through a timeline, it's like funny, sincere apology, or like very serious thing. So the ADHD campaign, definitely one of my favorite things I've worked on, was originally proposed by our press PR team. And they were interested in talking about the sort of extra costs that come with living with ADHD. Because obviously, if you live with ADHD, then you end up spending so much more money on things like forgetting to cancel subscriptions, or being like overpaying for things, just having trouble keeping track of where your money is. And like Monzo can help with a lot of that, whether it's just like increased visibility of where your money is, or sorting your money by pots, notifications, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like talking about how Monzo can help. But the research we commissioned was to find out, can we put a number on that? Like, can we quantify the actual cost and sort of talk about it? So the press PR team shared that work with us, shared their findings, and they shared it as a press piece, and we shared it on social to try and drive awareness, start a conversation around like the extra cost of living with ADHD. And to your point about, is it weird to sort of try and do that alongside silly memes, jokes, fun? I don't think it is at all. And like, we were able to really naturally sort of incorporate it into our like day-to-day programming. And the reason for that is because it's basically coming from the same place. It's coming from a place of like, we see you, we see our customers. And so as much as like one post might be talking about, the extra costs of when you're at an airport and you end up spending 50 quid on snacks at WH Smith, that is like, we see you, we relate to you. This is like a behavior we've exposed, next to a post which is like, if you live with ADHD, you have this. Both of those things are basically coming from the same reference point, right? Same sort of interest in you as a person and how you live. And one is a bit silly and one is very serious, but we are able to not have those clash with each other because, we are doing it with a consistent tone of voice so can feel as well. That helps smooth that over. But like ultimately, it's just because one's silly doesn't mean that we can't also talk about something very serious at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it's the same, coming from the same place.
Yeah. And I think that element within the brand makes it so unique, is that you are able to have fun and you are able to do things a little bit differently and, have fun sometimes, be serious sometimes. And I think that's really important for a lot of brands. But I wanted to talk because we had John Thornton on the podcast from Surreal. And his episode is amazing. So if you haven't watched it or listened to it, definitely do. Yep. But obviously Surreal, Monzo, brands these kind of brands are being like super disruptive. And I think that there's so many people that, I chat to or that listen to the podcast that are like, how can I like be more disruptive with my brand? And how do you think that, I don't know if you've got any advice, or like, how would you say people can be more, creative and disruptive within kind of what they're doing with their marketing?
I guess just like look at what the common trends are and do the opposite. I mean, it's such a cliche to say like when everyone else zag, but take a platform like LinkedIn, for instance. What are most people doing? They're posting boring content that doesn't stand out. So just post fun content that does stand out. Like that's what Surreal do really, really well. Like the reason they've like dominated LinkedIn is because no one expects to see big, bright colors with silly jokes on. So like disruption isn't really that hard when you just look at what everyone else is doing and have a mindset of being disruptive. Obviously, it kind of depends who you are, what you're doing. I talk to social media managers and they tell me, I work for a shipping container manufacturer. How can I be disruptive? And I'm like, okay, you've got it a little bit harder than I do, but slap a green screen face filter on a shipping container and talk as if make a character up. There you go. That's solved. You can disrupt that industry very easily. So I guess it's just like having a disruptive mindset, looking for the creative opportunities, being like, well, what do we have? At Monzo, often it was like, well, what do we have to talk about? We have our product, and that's amazing. There's only so much we can talk about our product. We can't talk about creating a savings account 5 times in a week. That's like, once every couple of weeks kind of thing to talk about. What do we have? Well, we've got a card. That's cool. Like we have this bright pink card that is very disruptive. Let's make loads of content with that. So like going around the world, taking photos of the card in different places. There you go, done. Okay, what else do we have? Literally searching around the office, being like, oh, what we got. And like one of the things that we found was when staff have kids at Monzo, we send them like a new baby pack. And as part of that pack was a very cute plushie, like a little plush toy of a Monzo card. And we were like, cool, that's our content strategy for the next 6 months. So we create those like plushy content. Like I think Duolingo had the same thing. And you can like, obviously it's a much bigger version. But like, I think the Duolingo owl, which is like so famous on TikTok, was originally made for like their hiring team, I think. I think it was like, so like job fairs and stuff, they could have like, come and meet Duolingo. But like, they were like, no, that we're having that. So like, just looking for the opportunities, because there are unique things about your company, whether that's like your office or even the people. Maybe you've got someone like really funny or someone really interesting or someone really tall. I don't know. There's always like something you can do to be like, no, this is ownable. We can do something with this. Even if you are a shipping container company, there's something you can do.
Yeah. And you are quite disruptive with your own personal brand as well.
Yep.
So you recently started adding things to a British Airways billboard. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, like what I'm saying for like brands, I would also apply to myself. Like LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like the funniest place because everyone takes themselves so seriously. Like it like cracks me up just like reading someone's sincere. I woke up at 4:30, did a workout, raised my 10 kids, went to the gym. Just like, oh my god, like don't take yourself so seriously. So like the way I think about like my own, I hate to use the word personal brand because I don't really have a personal brand. I was like having fun on LinkedIn, but like what entertains me is creating content that like parodies or satirizes the very serious content. So I like, yes, I am trying to be disruptive, but it's just because I'm basically just trying to make fun of people who take themselves too seriously. Like with the BA thing, people, there's a whole world of marketers on LinkedIn who just love to like talk about ads. It's like, oh, have you seen the latest billboard from X? Have you seen and we've had this for our own content. For Monzo, we've shared billboards and stuff, and half the comments are just marketers being like, oh yeah, but the logo is not very big. Or it's like, oh, they got the kerning wrong on the font. I was like, oh my God, like no one cares. Only you care. So yeah, my series on LinkedIn I'm doing at the moment is very much a kind of like, what if we took all the feedback that everyone ever had on ads, literally, and I'm on day like 10 or 11 of just like making those adjustments to prove how horrible content would be if we listened to every single piece of feedback we heard on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just being silly. I'm not. There's no strategy here. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm going to post tomorrow. I'm not really thinking about it to that extent. I'm just like trying to entertain myself, and if I can entertain other people, that's great.
Yeah. So to close the episode, I'd love to just ask you if you have, and kind of like look into that crystal ball. I know none of us kind of know really, but do you think that there's any like trends or like challenges that we're going to kind of start seeing with social media? Anything that you think, people should be aware of?
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because I'll be wrong. Like I couldn't tell you what's going to happen in social media in 6 months' time. Like social media constantly takes me by surprise. You never know. Like Threads going to come out of nowhere, and like Threads is like the black sheep of our channels at the moment. Like it's probably going to be something. It's nothing yet, and we're viewing it as a bit of a kind of like test and learn area. And just this week, I was invited to a new social network called like Air Chat or something, which is Twitter, but you can only post voice notes basically. And I'm like, I don't want to even think about that right now. So like, I don't want to say the future of social is voice chat because it may not be. I don't want it to be. I'd be horrified if I had to create voice content every single day. So you never really know. I think there are like broad content trends that you can look at. Like the rise of chaotic marketing, creative chaos, I guess you could call it. And I always talk about this like chaotic arms race of content. You know, if Duolingo set the bar here, where do you go from? And everyone meets that bar and everyone's just creating like chaotic, surreal, mad content, then you can't stand out. So you have to go like one step beyond and find a new bar to set. So everyone's like constantly kind of up in the ante on like weird. I always say social media is only going to get weirder. Brands are going to get more bizarre, act out. People are going to sort of question, is the social media manager okay? Like you see a lot of that, like is the social media manager's gone rogue, that kind of thing. Brands like, I guess Duolingo, but like Wendy's, obviously Ryanair in this country, brands that have like stood out by being kind of wild. So I guess that's my one prediction, is just like things are going to get weirder. Things will always get weirder because that's the only place to go creatively, really. But then I guess like brands acting more like publishers than broadcasters. I think that like brands are slowly cottoning on, even some of the legacy brands are cottoning on to the fact that social media is not really a great place to broadcast big sales messages or bash people over the head with, you know, things that they like, messages that they need to get out for whatever reason. They're going, okay, people actually come to social to be like entertained or educated in some way. How can we create content that feels more like a creator made it or a successful publisher made it? So that's definitely something we're trying to think about, is like, if we were a creator, not a brand, what content would we create? Or if we were a newsroom or something, or a journalistic publication that had like, what was wanting to entertain its audience, what would they make? What would we commission as like content, and like trying to fulfill that brief rather than being like, oh, we've got to talk about ISIS, you know, again this week or something like that. So yeah, that's those are my predictions. Yeah. Chaos and content that feels more like is made for the purposes of like entertainment. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. It was a good one, wasn't it? If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and rating of the podcast and share it with someone who may find it useful. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but in the meantime, keep up to date with Girls in Marketing over on social media and our website. We'll pop some helpful links in the description.